Welcome to the Story of the Week podcast. This is the supplemental podcast to the supplemental podcast that goes along with the weekday morning newscast we call Things You Might Have Heard, produced by The Conversation Project, all a part of the More Better Media umbrella. My name is Jay Cleveland Payne, and this podcast will go into a deep dive into one of those top news stories for this week based on your engagement with the headlines posted on Facebook and Twitter, or X, you want to still call it that. This week was dominated by stories that included Ned's Declassified, also the Rainbow Bridge in Canada, and LSU's Angel Reese, but the story we're explaining has this headline. Jessica Alba sparks a discussion about age on social media. This was the number 10 ranked story this week, posted on Sunday, November the 19th for the week ending November the 26th. Here is the details on that headline. But before I get into that commentary, quick reminder that you can go by our website. This is theconversationproject.com. Get all the details on what we do and the whys we do it every single day for daily news and conversational topics. And of course, email us at theconversationinbox@gmail.com. Once again, providing commentary for the week ending November 25th, 2023. Let's get into the story and how we got here. But how we got here first, a little bit of background detail. And yes, we'll talk from Dolly Pardon too. Yes, we'll get that in there as well. But let's do some background on how we got to this headline. Jessica Alba, the actor and the business person, entrepreneur who runs the Honest Company, a company that makes natural products for all the good of us, has been acting since the late teens, maybe early teens, but on TV since the Dark Angel days way, way back when. And the actual discussion came down on a podcast where she was basically told that as a 42-year-old 9, she's a 9, and from 1 to 10, she's that hot-looking 42-year-old, she would still get beaten out in any competition, in any choosing contest, if you will, by someone who's 26, who's just a 6. So the 26-year-old 6, because of age, will beat a 42-year-old 9, as the podcaster says, any day. And that sparked a discussion on her beauty and what the hell this lady was talking about. This lady, her name is Bobbi Althoff. Bobbi Althoff is a YouTuber, a TikToker, a social media maven, if you will, who runs the Really Good podcast. And it's really good as a way of just sort of being more ironic, if you will. It's not necessarily the greatest podcast in the world, but that's the point. It's not a polished, it's not a Rachel Maddow big-time interview. It's not a Drew Barrymore sort of soft interview. It's just one lady with a microphone on video, because all podcasts are actually videos these days, even though that's not what it really means. And she's doing her thing. She gets a chance to interview pretty famous people because she has like 1 million followers and all that great stuff. And that's all great. No, jealousy on that end. But she has a chance to talk to lots of great famous people in her podcast. And she has a real obsession with Drake and a lot of things going on. So people listen to her. People watch her. People want to hear her go into detail with the artists and the actors, because she's not given the Hollywood interview, because that's not what she does. She's sponsored, she's making money, she's Instagram famous, if you will, but she's not out there trying to shill for Pepsi or Coke or Tide or those folks right there that are doing the daytime talk shows. So she'll get into it with the artists, the actors, the people. She'll cause a little commotion. She'll ask them a question that's not a great question. Questions that aren't necessarily bad questions, but that aren't leading towards the cheat sheet of what they're trying to promote, what's trying to sell. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but you always want to have your guests back. In this day and age, apparently just being outlandish is what brings people back, so it doesn't really matter. But what we have with Miss Althoff, Bobbi, if you will, is a bit of ageism popping up, which is really getting to creep me out, because I'm in the age where ageism actually makes a difference. I am about to turn 50 years old in less than a year. And at that stage where I am in Gen X, where I still believe I'm young, but I know I'm not, but there's so many baby boomers who are still in charge, we really can't take things over. It's going to be an issue for quite a while, apparently. And with Jessica Alba being out of the range of the Gen Xers, I'm pretty sure I'm like slightly by the age of the actual change of demographic, it's becoming an issue for people who are getting older in the millennial sort of stance. And that should be a problem. Although when I was 20 years older, I looked towards people who were 20 years older than me now and thought the same thing. So I guess it's more perspective as age and wisdom than actually something to deal with. Let's go back to the original premise of the actual article that we pulled from. In the interview that Althoff had with Alba, who of course is the CEO of the Honest Company, making lots of money doing that stuff. So she's not so much doing much acting or modeling or things like that, just basically running a company that seems to be running well. Other famous people seem to be running their companies into the ground. That's a whole nother podcast. But Alba essentially was attacked. That's the only way I can say that. About her being, the hot mom, the good-looking older woman, if 42 is older, as opposed to the younger people who are coming up and taking things over in their 20s right now. And the whole, you're a hot 9 at 42, but a 26-year-old, because they're younger, who's a 6, would pull weight on any occasion, essentially all occasions. Just the fact that she was a good-looking older person, the fact that people know that she's in her 40s, the demo that would be the 20, 30-ish people would always pull for the 26-year-old because she's 26, and being a 6 would mean she's, okay looking, but, not out of range of someone who was, overdoing it as a 9 in their 40s. This bothers me a hell of a lot. Number one, it bothers me because it's Jessica Alba, who has been beautiful probably since baby birth and has been portrayed as a hot, sexy symbol since late teens, which kind of says something bad about that, but has always been light of someone who's been a beautiful actress, a beautiful model, beautiful person, and never has actually been played off as someone who was in any case a regular looking person. Basically, she always looks like she's made up. It's like the makeup is already magically done as soon as she wakes out of bed. She actually gets up like that, apparently. And to say that someone who comes to this podcast, while Althoff isn't, maybe she's the 26-year-old 6 we're talking about because she's not, dressed to 9. Alba is dressed up, looking like a professional, looking nice, looking like she has some place to go, and decided to put on pants and not pajama pants and wear actual shoes and not Crocs with charms in them, comes to the show, does the show because people watch it, people listen to it. This is where the kids are these days. My kid is 11 and we can't pull her away from her phone, her tablet, or her Chromebook because all she wants to do is watch things off YouTube. She barely knows how her TV works. It's using the remote control makes no sense, but she can pull things on YouTube without any issue. Because that's where the kids are. That's where they're getting the information from, unfortunately. And that is where they're getting their entertainment from and infotainment here in the old style stuff. This is not Mike Douglas doing his stuff. This is not anywhere near a Frost-Nixon debate. This is where it is. People get nice cameras, they get some background, some friends to hang out, put up some microphones. And if you have enough people following you on social media for whatever it is that made you famous, someone famous will show up and talk on your podcast. And you can make the play there. Now, Joe Rogan, on a whole nother level, having some talent, having some skill, working his way through the business and turning what was just sort of a thing to do into what's one of the more powerful entertainment and infotainment sort of things out there. He has all comers on the show, and some of them are pretty much out there, but he's earned it. I can't fight that. I can just only hate the hater for what's going on in that one. In this one, I'm not sure what Althoff's actual motive is other than being famous and not having to do any real work. But the premise of her shows are usually pretty light, pretty whimsical. Although she will sort of ask the questions that are the rude, the insane, the not great questions that, oddly enough, I had a pilot for a show at one time to ask those sort of questions in a sort of controlled area where we got a chance to ask a famous person some odd-ish question. They get to choose the odd question out of a batch of 3 or 4, and they would answer it for us so that we can kind of get off their case. But this is one where she does it. The entertainers can't just show up for publicity because it's not, public like that. But they can show up to get some experience and get some exposure to the mass amount of fans that are online watching the shows. And Althoff is no slouch by any means. Her YouTube channel has 993,000 subscribers. It only has 26 videos on this because the podcast is fairly new to this thing here. But some of the people that she's had recently include Mark Cuban, also folks like Offset, Jason Derulo, and many folks who are famous enough to be on this. And of course, the big Jessica Alba one is the newer one out there that's got all the gets going out there. The Really Good Podcast is what she calls it because it's cool, more or less. Not so much one of the things that are about it being a great podcast and a great production, but she has good conversations and bring things out in people's conversations. So you do get a bit of the insight that you would not get from other folks. However, this is a horrible take. Jessica Alba is a 9. Okay. Jessica Alba is 42 years old and a 9. Okay. Jessica Alba would be beaten by a 26-year-old 6. Hells to the no. Hells to the no. Hells to the no, 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 no. No, no, no. A little bit pause for effect. A little extra pause for effect. No. And I guess it's working because she's on the internet. People are looking to it. I would not have picked up on her except for this actual podcast and the headline it pulled from this, or essentially actually all the Twitter actual responses it pulled from this. And this is how I pulled into her interviewing Mark Cuban. And I may go back to a couple other ones. Jason Derulo and Offset, not really caring about those guys, although Jason Derulo is becoming more interesting person in his own. But it's the whole thing about the Jessica Alba and the Nine thing. Now, this is where we jump the shark completely. And if you're under the age of, 37, this may actually not be a reference that makes any sense to you either way. This past week, we had the Thanksgiving Day holiday football games. Dallas Cowboys are one of the teams that traditionally host a game of Thanksgiving. Also, Detroit Lions. Cowboys had the second game of the night, and they announced this months ago, where Dolly Pardon, who was going to be promoting a new album of rock songs covers that she's doing as part of her being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. She said she didn't have any actual rock music in her repertoire. That said, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. She said, no, not really. And then the guy's like, hey, let's just record some. And she's like, okay. So she's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. She's got some rock music. She played and she sang, I should say, We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions, along with classics like Jolene and 9 to 5. I'm sure people like more classics on that stage, but she is promoting an album and a Sirius XM channel that is all about the rock stuff, if you will. And she came out there because she was in Dallas, because, it's what you do, dressed up like a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader. And although she's 77 years old, she didn't look like a 77-year-old cheerleader. She looked like one of the cheerleaders as they looked in the 70s, 1970. So Dolly Parton, and get it, she's in a little short. She's got the little top on, so it's not like she's wearing Spanx or anything like that. So she's obviously got it working for the show, things going on. You can complain about the actual performance. People think, well, maybe she was lip syncing, and why was she holding on to the stage? Apparently, she was supposed to have some sort of stand to stand on way up there, and it just didn't work out. So she had to just kind of lean back on the thing, which meant her movements were a little off. So the show may not have been the best show in the world, but number one, Fox throwing out Jack Harlow in a Frozen set from some High School Musical, doing his thing with a weird guy in a green hat lip sync behind him for no reason. And number two, NBC deciding to just cut away from the DJ without showing any halftime show, shows who won the night on that end. And number three, maybe up close, maybe if you got to look at all the makeup she had going on, because she says she does trashy for a living, and she does a great living doing trashy, you may have not mistaken her for a hot 42 or a not so hot 26, but from a distance, from the camera angles we had and whatever they did to make her up to stand on that stage, CGI or whatever, she had it working. She had it going on. And trust me, Tony Romo had some feelings about the show when it was over. It's all said and done. But we're not here to objectify Dolly Parton. Oddly enough, we're here to objectify Jessica Alba and all the people who are in their younger parts of the years, their developing years, I'll say, their 20s, moving into the 30s, who are taking an eye at the folks who are 10, 15, 20 years older than them, late 30s, 40s, and 50s, and wondering, what's up with all these old people trying to stay young? Here's the weirdness of it all. I'm about to be 50 years old in less than a year. And one of the weird things about that is, I don't feel like I'm an old person. I know I'm older. I know I'm more mature. I know I have a better credit rating and better driving record than I did 20 years ago. And it makes a difference. But what does not really pan out is the fact that, other than the fact that I think the music of today is horrible, I still think I'm young. I'm not a big fan of Drake, but I still think I'm young. Still think I have plenty to go. Still think I have a lot to offer going forward for life. I'm still here on the internet trying to catch up to Bobbi Althoff for some reason, because I think my opinion means something. I'd like to have Jessica Alba and maybe Offset and Jason Derulo on my show. Definitely Mark Cuban. But I'm not there because I'm not a 26-year-old 6 or something. Here's the thing. You are literally never too old to give it a shot. This is not the moment I'm going to rehash the whole Colonel Sanders needed some money and wanted to sell chicken to try to make it up, and did it by going to all these places to sell his famous fried chicken recipe. We're not going to go into that right now, but let's put that in the back of your mind as I go through this very quick little rant here. Think about where you are right now. My podcast is in the target range of people between 35 and 45 years old, and slightly younger than I am. But essentially, the larger target range goes from the 35s to around 55 to 60. There are people in that middle age who are looking for news stories and looking for places to get their information to stay hip, if you will, stay conversational. And we do that by putting it out on the internet and letting everybody react to it. So sometimes a story that is really hit for the younger folks comes in for people to see, which is why it works. Sometimes it's something that an older generation or someone that is kind of a niche type of person will pull into. It pulls up high. We bring it in there and it becomes a conversational topic. It's often the intergenerational conversations we have that make our world go round. It's the way that the elderly find a way to teach the young how to make things work. It's the way the young keep the elderly basically young and in hip what's going on. We exchange information between generations, between groups, and that's how we get to know more about each other and how we stay more relevant as human beings. And so if the conversation part of the actual podcast, which I'm going to be honest, not watched, listened to the whole podcast, I'm basically hot taking one little clip off of YouTube that, everyone's hot taking. If the conversational part of the actual show was great, then it's great. If her really good podcast is good enough to get people entertained, that's great. I don't watch 3 hours of Joe Rogan ramble on with various people. I watch for clips. I see what the big pieces are brought out to in social media. I'll go deeper into detail of those things if I need to, if I want to. But sometimes he's talking weird docu-science that makes no sense. Sometimes he's talking weird political stuff for people who are fringe. He is doing that. He's doing it on purpose because he has an audience. People will come listen and watch what he's doing regardless, and he can command the dollars to do that. For me, in my podcasts and my videos, I have to hit the hot topics as best as possible because I don't have the audience. I've got to hit something that's going to bring in eyeballs and keep them as long as possible because I need to grow. I am at 800 subscribers, not in the 6 figures like these other folks with play buttons behind them in YouTube. So I don't have the luxury of rambling on about random stuff because people turn me off, as opposed to people won't turn off other people who ramble on about random stuff because they're already famous and eventually they'll say something profound. Actually, they usually don't get around profound, but that's just how things go. But this is a conversation that was, I guess, useful for someone. It took up time. It takes up space. It's living in the heads of a lot of people out there. And the Twitter, the X, loved it for a couple days. And we seemed to love it for an entire week. This was a top story we posted because it was a last week podcast-ish thing for while we had the clips coming out. And so the weekend it was there and people got into it. And early in the week, we talked about it. And this is one that survived by the numbers and engagement all the way to the end of this week into the weekly wrap-up podcast we have here. It was number 10, so it wasn't the strongest number here. But when we got to a chance to pick the story and go back and forth to see where things were, it was the strongest headline. It was the headline that made the most sense. It's the one that actually I had, really kind of got into my dander a little bit to talk about what's going on. Now, check out the podcast. And this is my chance to, I guess, hype up the really good podcast by Bobbi Althoff. You can find her on YouTube at youtube.com/@the_Bobbi with an I, Althoff. So search for that. And you can see more for yourself. She only has a few videos out. She's been doing TikTok and other things for about 2 years. It's one of those things where she just kind of had the itch to do the thing. She took off, and because of that, she gets a chance to be in the clear and do these things. Good for her. Me, I'm still trying to get there, so hopefully I get there. But for this one, the point of this actual discussion, the whole she's a 42-year-old 9 but cannot pull like a 26-year-old 6 is, it's not a really good podcast. It's a totally horrible take. And I'm going to say that. Shot it from the rooftops over and 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 over. And a little pause for effect. A little more, slightly more pause for effect. And over. With that, let's just say this week's podcast for the story of the week is now over. Wrapping up for this week's podcast. Thank you so much for being a part of the show for this week. Thank you for helping us get these things done. This topic does not become a topic unless you let us know it's a topic. Follow us on our feeds at Facebook and Twitter. Facebook.com/This Is a Conversation Project. Twitter.com, we still call it Twitter. You can call it X you want to. th_conversation. Email us at theconversationinbox@gmail.com. Our website, home, this is a conversationproject.com, where you can find details on how the project works. And you can find where you can follow us for all of our projects, including the daily show, which is things you might have heard, and all the ways we pop up through give you conversational things all week long, all day long, all night long. We put news headlines in our feeds every 50 minutes all the time. So we're looking for you to engage in them. The higher engagement we get, the better chance we have of talking about this one. We could have been talking about Angel Reese this week, but we're talking about Jessica Alba. We took been talking about the Rainbow Bridge and the car that rammed through the bridge checkpoint in Canada. We're talking about this one because what came about in the top 10, Jessica Alba's story was the one that basically won the day for us here. If you think we picked the right story, let me know in the email comments or wherever you get this podcast or video. If not, let me know that as well. Make sure you're staying limber and hydrated and on task for all the grand things that you are here to do today, tomorrow, and well into the future. We don't want to make your future premature, or you don't to do anything to make your future premature when it's got a long way to go and a lot of work to get to. With that, I'm Jay Cleveland Payne. We'll find out what story next week we'll just sort of get in my craw and we'll talk about here for 10, 20 minutes here in the internets, online, and with you as a part of the Conversation Project. Thank you for joining us for the story of the week for this week. We will see you next week.